Hi guys, and welcome to another video. So I thought, because I never actually made a video on that, to make one today in terms of how to set up your server-side GTM container. Okay, so you want to know more? Let's dive right into it. Okay, cool. So as you can see here, I have actually already a client-side container here and a server-side container here, which we can see as well, web and server. Okay, so we refer to a client-side container, then we actually talk about a web container, which is sitting on a website. That's why also the name web here. It's basically sitting within the code of a website, and if somebody enters, then certain things are measured. Okay, like a page view, for example, right? And then the server is outside of that, where you can send over the traffic from the client-side container, GTM container, to your server-side container. But now the big question here is, how do you set up this server-side container? And how do you ensure that you also maintain a solid tracking in your server-side container? Meaning that if you use your Google Cloud Platform for your tracking purposes, you might have cold spins, or where actually your servers cool down, and once somebody enters or performs an action on your site and the server is kind of like contacted or pinged, right, basically it has to spin up. And sometimes it can happen that from a cold start, so once it spins up, it is quite slow because it needs a few seconds, and then you might not measure everything, so not your entire traffic. So I have come up with a good plan on how to set up the cheapest solution for you. So even you, as a low traffic site with not a lot of traffic, I don't know how many sessions, maybe 100, 200, 300, you can also take full advantage of Google Cloud Platform, still ensure that you're tracking more or less everything. And it's kind of like a really good solution, I think, for many. So how do you do it? So first of all, if we create a server-side container, you would usually go up to these three dots here. You would say create a container. I just want to show you also how this looks like. So we could potentially name this server create. Let's say it's a URL. You don't have to make it a URL, but just for illustration purposes, I want to show that. And if you go to server here, so the last point down here, and then to create, I will show you how this looks like. Nothing bad can happen here as well. So you can even delete the server-side environment again if you want to. The only thing that I want to say is here, so there are two things or two options now. You could automatically provision a tagging server, as it mentions here, and then it says use a guided flow to provision a server on Google Cloud Platform. If you do that automatically, it will basically do all the hard work for you, the heavy lifting, right? If you do this manually, then you have to set certain instances, parameters, etc. within your Cloud Run instance, like within Google Cloud Platform. So Cloud Run is a category, you could say, a category within your Google Cloud Platform or your Google Cloud Console that you can access next to many, many other instances, features, etc. Right? To be really honest, I've just tried to set that manually up once, and it was quite hard to do, to be honest. I wasn't even sure in the end if it works exactly how I wanted to. So what is the difference basically? So if you set up the automatically provisioning tagging server, your server will be sitting in US Central. So somewhere in the US Central, I think it's US Central 1 or whatever, we will see that later on. It's named like that. It will be sitting there. And it, for example, if you're in Europe or in Asia, you might not want that. You might want your server to be either in Europe or Africa or in Asia or whatnot. Me personally, I don't mind. So I just preferred this option because it was way easier to do, and I was actually pretty certain that it works fine. Okay, so I'm not going to do this now here because I don't want to create a new project within my GTM, not in my GTM, in my Google Cloud Platform, but I will tell you or show you how it looks after you press this button. Let me just X out on this. It would look something like that. So these two instances are created automatically. So one is called server-side tagging, one is server-side tagging preview. Basically, you just work with the upper one here, the server-side tagging one. And yeah, basically, if you have that set up here, you could actually click into it. You have done all the heavy lifting, or actually it has done the heavy lifting for you. The only thing here, which is important, and that was something which I wasn't quite sure how to do initially, because I knew, here you can actually see that as well. US Central 1 is the region. You can actually see it here as well when I go back. Here, US Central 1. And this region here, that's what I meant before. If you do it manually, you could set that wherever you want. In Europe somewhere, Asia, Africa, Australia, probably as well. That's the only difference. So let me just go in there again. Failed to load. Okay, let me just load again. Okay, so we're going into our server-side tagging instance now again. So what you can see here now, so and that's really important now. If you want, so let's say your website has low number of traffic. Then let's say somebody enters your website, like a user, performs an action, and then is basically, let's say you have server-side tagging set up already. You get on client-side GTM, you get a hit or like a page view, and this page view is directed to your server-side environment. And now, because this server here can get into a state that's kind of like a cold state, it has to spin up. Basically, it has to get started basically, and this can take a little bit, and it might be that it starts a little bit late, so you do not actually record this page view, for example, or other request, which you don't want, right? You want to have full tracking capability and see what your users are doing. Otherwise, I mean, what for do you need server-side tracking, right? I mean, that's something that you want to ensure. So there are actually a few options to ensure that you record everything. So there's this scaling auto minimum number of instances, right? So usually if you would have this on one, you, as you can see here, set to one to reduce cold starts. That's what I'm referring to. So if you have a 0 here, it will always be a cold start. Once somebody enters the page, performs an action, etc., sent over, then it can delay everything a little bit and you might not record everything. So my suggestion, if you want to save as much money as possible, okay, then I guess my suggestion would be the following. You keep auto scaling on 0. You don't go for manual scaling, or you set it to 0. I think by default, when you set up your server, it is actually on 0 if I don't remember incorrectly, but I think so. But now the thing, here comes the trick. First of all, I would recommend to set up a cloud scheduler. So if you type in this address bar, you can type, here it is already, cloud scheduler. You can go there, open that. And as you can see, I already created this instance here. So you would just create a new job in here. And then you will have to define a few things, okay? So you put a name, put a random name. What am I doing? Put a random name, for example. Then as you can see here, region, you can even select that across different regions. Whatever fits your needs the best, right? Probably Europe if you're in Europe, or other places, or you keep it as you do in your server-side tagging environment. I think actually I did it that way. Anyhow, if you go further down, the frequency is important. So the frequency you can set with these stars. So something like that would be a 3. Oops. So it actually tells you anyway. No, we can't see that anymore, but it's something like that. With these marks here, can't remember exactly how they look like now. You have to read up on this. It's characters every. So I can then show you again on my instance how I did it. I had to look it up myself as well. But basically, let me just go back there real quickly. I think that's maybe insightful. Let me just go in my project real quickly. Cloud scheduler, it's not here. Down here, cloud scheduler. So it makes sense. This is the frequency. So it's kind of like asterisk /5 There's like you have to decode it, right? You have to know what you do, but it's pretty simple actually. So this is 5 minutes. So this means basically if I created a job, it was something like that, 5, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, I think. Yeah, exactly, something like that. That would field missing for our, I'm not sure what I have been missing here. Let me just go in there real quickly. Let's just replicate it from here. I think that's how I did it, right? No? Just go back here. Let me just fill that in again. Sorry, it's with spaces in between. That's it. Okay, so as you can see here now, I'm actually doing it every 5 minutes. And then down here, time zone, whatever makes sense for you. Let's just pick the first one, whatever it is. Let's move that here, whatever that is, AMT. Then continue, configure the execution target type, which would be workflow, would be HTTP. I think I've done it this way, workflow. Let me just check that. So I'm not, yeah, HTTP, sorry. It was HTTP, and then the URL. So this is the important thing here. So that's actually the little bit more tricky part, I guess. So in my case, I am using a subdomain where I'm sending the traffic to. So basically, you could, from this cloud scheduler, send traffic on to your GA4 account, right? So whenever I, for example, so these are kind of like pings or hits that would go to your GA4 account through your server, of course, right? Because you would ping your server basically. So how do you do it? So you would, for example, in my case, it's a subdomain that I'm using. So it's something like that. So it's events.createdigital.at. So I guess the important part here, which you really have to put in, is this part here. This is important. Then here, this is the API version, which is 2. I guess probably this, you should have this at least, like that. And then the TID is the measurement ID within your Google Analytics account, if you wanted to use that. The thing though is, you don't necessarily want to do that, because because this was a mistake that I did, because I didn't think about it actually going to the server, but then from the server to Google Analytics as well, right? So each page view that comes through will go on to my GA4 account as well, right? I can show you this real quickly. So if you F it up, then all of a sudden you get like every 5 minutes you get a ping or a hit or a page view, actually in this case even, and that overinflates everything. So I'm getting around 288 hits or page views basically, right, from this 5-minute scheduler. So of course what you have to do is you have to use a dummy TID here, which would be something I've now named it to keep me warm or something, because this is basically just pinging data over to the server so it doesn't cools off, right? So I can track better. So I named it something like that, I think. And then the CID, so the CID is usually the client ID, right? Or the session ID, which is usually recorded as a cookie as a GA underscore and then a number, right? This I would also just do as a fake. So that could even be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Usually I think it wants to have 10 numbers, but I think you could potentially even have less. I think I put 10 there. And then the T is this like that. T. And then we got, oh, this is not correct here. This should actually be an N. N is page view. Yeah. Pretty sure that's EN, sorry. So let me just check that. Yeah. So as you can see here, then you have and EN page view. So why do you need to do it this way? Let me just go back here. And EN page view, yeah, so that's correct. So why do you need to do it this way? Because you have to follow a specific rule here. You can't just do anything. You have to provide these data points. So the collect function here, you have to send that on. You have to add your TID. Doesn't matter which name you add here. I wouldn't use the GA4 measurement ID. Otherwise, unless you want to track, if your scheduler is running well, then you could perhaps put a filter there, and to maybe you could remove that from your standard reports or something, so you can always go back and have a look if it worked or not. Then you have your client ID. You can just do any random number here. And then you need to add en is page view as well. And then basically that's it. The rest I've kept how they are. Also the minimum backoff duration, I didn't mind. Backoff, yeah. So it tells you minimum time to wait before retrying a job after it fails. Okay. I mean, that's just default settings that I've left here. And then I created this whole thing. Then what did I create? I created exactly this here, which is my Cloud Run instance. Runs every 5 minutes. Can see that. Next run is 15:35. Last run was 15:30. Last updated, whatever that is. Because I performed a change like 20 minutes ago or something. Yeah. Okay, so that's basically what you have to do from that side. And once you have done that, you're pretty, solid in terms of your server side and GTM tracking, that you also record everything. And it's a very cheap way. One more thing is important. You also have to do that. So before I forget. So when you're in this instance here, let me just go back to my environment actually. So we will go back here. We will go back to Cloud Run. And this is my instance here, right? So I go in here. Then here under revisions, that's actually very important because as a default, I think it changes that. So I actually changed that just today actually. So when you look into revisions and then go to edit and deploy new revision, you will find something like that here. And down here somewhere, even further down, here in the billing section. So if you don't want to pay heaps, you have to move away from instance-based, charged for the entire lifecycle of instances, full CPU for the entire lifetime of each instance, okay? You don't need that, only when processing requests. I would do that whenever you process the request. And as it says here, the CPU is limited outside of request. So it wouldn't always be an idle and wait for a request, kinda. It kinda turns off. And is not constantly kind of working in the background. So this one is giving you or going on idle mode or like a parking mode, so to speak. And then when you need it, it will fire, but not before that. You can leave these ones as they are. They don't really matter too much. And they are about request timeouts, not about instance timeouts. So this is something else. So I would just go ahead with those. And then I believe this is probably the cheapest way how you can use Google Cloud Server or Google Cloud Platform for server-side GTM. I hope that was helpful. If you like my videos, please consider subscribing below. Helps you, helps me. I'm happy about that. Gives me a smile on my face. And yeah, if you want to learn more, I help digital marketers, analysts, and business owners as well, if they want to learn it themselves, or even interested people doing that stuff themselves to upscale. And I also train people and so on. All the details below. Keep watching, keep learning. Bye bye.